Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today I'm going to show you my round 2 game from the Graz Open. In round 1 I played a very complicated game against a FIDE master, you could have seen it in the previous video. And in round 2 I got paired against a Grandmaster, Italian Grandmaster Lorenzo Lodici, who is obviously really strong. And I'd prepared for the game quite extensively and there were a lot of options since he plays many things, which is usual for a strong player. And I actually got to play one of the variations that I'd been looking at. We got into a Nimzo-Indian, so bishop b4, and I played queen c2. The queen c2 Nimzo. And here he played a move I was expecting. There are many options, of course. The best one should be to simply castle. Alternatives are c5 or d5. Knight c6 is possible, d6 is possible. He played b6, which goes into a kind of Queen's Indian setup. The idea is to control e4 as much as possible. And in order to increase control over e4, I played a3. Of course, I would like him to unpin my knight so that I can control e4. And if not, he has to give up the bishop pair. And since my queen is in c2, I get to have the bishop pair without ruining my pawn structure. So he plays bishop b7, and now again, it's all about controlling e4. So I played bishop g5, this is a theoretical move. And again, controlling e4, he wants to unpin his own knight. So bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, and knight e4. Queen c2. Again, theory, d6 and f3. Trying to support e4, and I don't really mind opening up the h file if they want to take, and he did take hg3. Now, in this position, the only move that has ever been played is knight to d7. Actually, queen f6 has been played a couple of times, and f5 has been played once, but those should be inferior. Black should be castling. But my opponent surprised me with h5. Now, this position, for me at least, was really instructive, and the fact that I did not understand it well gave my opponent a clear positional edge later on in the game. So here I can choose between e3 and e4, and that's not relevant for the kingside situation, but it will have some significance. Now, I played e3, and my idea was to challenge his bishop with bishop d3, bishop e4. For some reason, I never played it. I always had something else to do. I'm going to show you points during the game at which this was a great idea, in fact. So he played knight d7, and here I had the opportunity to sort of cause trouble on the king side for him. Now, this, I think, for me, was the most instructive part of the game. In hindsight, because of what happened during the game, I can see, or I understood immediately after the game that this was an idea. I'm sorry, there's someone at the door, so my dog may be barking. Just a second. Sorry about this. Lucia went to open the door, but I still wanted to calm the dog down because I didn't know who's at the door. I hope there's no more barking. Okay, so in this position, I could have gone for g4. And g4 is a very, very disruptive move. Of course, had he played queen f6 previously, this would just be a bad idea because the rook isn't attacked, or better to say the rook is defended by the queen. But in this position, they have no other option but to push h4, because I'm threatening to win a pawn. And if h4 is played, then I have an amazing square for my knight. Queen f6 wouldn't make as much sense because I may just castle and go queen d2 and e4, putting pressure on the pawn. So probably the queen has to go to e7 in order for the pawn to move to f6 in order for black to castle. So this would have been great. Unfortunately, I didn't see it. And if you didn't find the move g4, try to take note of this position. Okay, I played bishop d3, which is normal, queen f6, preventing g4, which at the time I did not understand. It's not only about castling, it's about preventing g4. And in this position, I could have played bishop e4, and this was the best move. This is the reason I played bishop d3, not only because I want my knight on e2 and this is the only sensible square, but this was actually my follow-up. So now if bishop takes, then queen takes, and castles, of course, loses because of queen a8 and knight b8, queen a7. So probably something like rook c8 has to be played, although I'm not sure. Now again, I have queen b7, maybe rook b8. And alternatively, after bishop e4, if they go c6, then I can go queen a4. And there's some annoying pressure on c6. So bishop e4 would have been a great idea. Unlike my other mistakes, or unlike other times when I don't capitalize on some of my opportunities, usually it's because I missed the ideas. This time I missed the idea, but I decided that, okay, before doing that, you need to castle, you need to develop. Unfortunately, in this position, I had no time for that. Bishop e4 was now. Instead, I castled. And he did the same. Now, of course, it's not as powerful because the bishop isn't undefended. So I went knight e2. Still, bishop e4 was best, nevertheless. Okay, I went knight e2, which isn't bad. The position should be about equal, but... Okay, king b8, knight c3, and just supporting e4 some more. Eventually, I want to play e4 because there's nowhere else to expand for me. He played queen e7, and now that the rooks have been connected, g4 is not a threat. He wants to free up his f-pawn to move. I played king b1, just getting out of some annoying pressure along this diagonal if possible. And he went f5. And this is what I'd expected. I wanted him to play f5, and king b1 is sort of a waiting move, but a useful move as well, because all of my pieces seem optimal, and I only want to play e4 after he's played f5. So f5, e4. And here he surprised me. I was really expecting him to take. Of course, if fe, then I take with the bishop. I don't want this pawn structure, although this would have been okay. Unfortunately, he has moves like e5, where, of course, if I go d5, then knight c5 is extremely, extremely unpleasant. Maybe I can get away with this and somehow start an attack, but I didn't really want to go in for something like this. So after fe4, I think I would have taken with the bishop, and if they push on, I would just simply take a pawn. So pushing isn't an option. And if something like bishop to a6, then I think I can go knight b5. This was my intention. If this is taken, my attack should be really strong with this bishop. And if they push, well, I still have the light squares. But yeah, he played f4. He did not take. And this, for me, is the second most instructive part of the game. Have a close look at this position. You have two options, basically. You can take the pawn, or you can defend your g3 pawn. Everything else loses a pawn. So I chose queen f2, which is a big mistake. And I'll explain why. On taking, of course, they take back. I really didn't like the fact that this is a backwards pawn, and I kept seeing positions with, let's say white does nothing, and something like rook g1, and rook g3, and h4. I was afraid of stuff like this. If this happens, I'm just done. This I cannot defend, especially not against a very, very strong player. Maybe a lesser player wouldn't know how to capitalize on this, but that seems unlikely for a grandmaster. So on f4, I was afraid of that. The thing I didn't see is that after gf4, I can simply go queen d2, and I'm just attacking the pawn. If, for example, rook to g8, I can now go b4, and I'm attacking black. I'm defending everything in my position. They actually don't have enough time to blockade, and if nothing, I can trade pawns, which isn't something I want to do, but I could. And I'm threatening c5 with knight b5. Or I could also go d5, but c5 seems more pleasant. But I went queen f2, and he went queen f6, bishop e2. Bishop e2 is not a good move, but I wanted to defend my pawn. Of course, if I don't play bishop e2, if I do nothing, then he can just take, and take. So bishop e2 is sort of a necessity, and I justified it by putting pressure on h5. But still, it was better to just take. He went a6, preventing knight b5, and now, again, gf4 was necessary. gf4 and queen h4 was a possibility. But again, I didn't go for that. Instead, I played a really stupid move, sticking to my idea that taking on f4 was bad and that it would be better if he takes. I played rook h3, and rook h3 is just a blunder. This is the first real advantage for black. It should be almost -1. He took on g3, I took with the queen, which is correct, and now h4. I dropped the queen back to e1 and knight f8. And once I saw knight f8, I sort of had the feeling that the game is over. I don't know if you're familiar with that feeling. Once you see a strong move on the board and you get overwhelmed and you see everything that's going to happen, this knight is coming to f4. There is absolutely nothing I can do about that. And once that happens, what am I going to do? Something like bishop f1 and knight e2? Maybe. But even then, if I take, this pawn is still bad. So a plausible variation is something like rook d2, knight g6, rook h1. Let's save my rook here, and maybe bishop d1 or bishop f1. And let's say here and here. Maybe I can hold with this. The engine says, okay, yeah, I just dropped my pawn. I cannot do that. I cannot challenge the knight immediately. Yeah, that's the other issue. If I could, maybe I can hold. But instead, I played a move that makes no sense at all. Similar to the previous game and similar to what you're going to see in the next game. Again, I played a one-move blunder. I wouldn't even call it a tactical blunder. It's just, I see that I'm getting a worse position, and then I do something rash and something that I haven't thought through well enough, and that loses material. In the previous game I lost the exchange, and this one I just gave up a pawn for nothing. And I played e5. e5 is such a bad move that from 0.9 the position goes to -3.5. And my idea was that maybe I can hold on to this pawn and trade off a pair of rooks and gain a tempo on the queen, which none of that makes any sense. Of course, if this is taken twice by black, then I win because I take the rook, but they're not going to do that. Also, if rook takes d1, then bishop takes d1, and again I'm holding on to the pawn. And if something like queen f4, my idea was to go bishop to c2 and just prevent knight g6. And that's in an ideal world. But after d5, my opponent simply plays queen f5 check, and I really should resign here. I didn't. I played king a1, knight g6, rook h1, queen e5, queen f2. Why did I give up my center? No reason. This is really hard to explain. It's not even that I missed queen f5 check. I felt so bad about my current position that I wanted to do something, anything, because I didn't want to allow the knight into f4 without a fight. But I chose a really stupid continuation. queen c5 offering a queen trade, and this queen trade is the third most instructive part of the game. The way he assessed this position after the queen trade is simply amazing. I'm not good enough, or I wasn't good enough to understand that. Once I saw what he did, I was just amazed. I never felt so good about learning something during the game, as absurd as that may sound. So have a look at this. I have no way to decline the queen trade. Basically, I can go queen f1, which isn't good. So they took. And the point is, I don't have anything to stop these pawns. Firstly, bishop f1 is forced. Now he trades rooks. He plays g4. And what can I do? I lost immediately. I just did not understand how powerful this was after queen c5 had been played. So let's look at some options. If I take the pawn, then it's over straight away. Bishop g2, and they are going to queen the pawn. So I knew that taking the pawn wasn't an option. If I go knight a4, then gf3, bishop f3, rook d2, trying to stop the pawn, h3, and now I basically have to take because h2 is coming. So once I take, of course, this is a losing position. I'm down a piece for nothing. And the only alternative, which I ended up playing during the game, was knight e4, trying to block this bishop, but this loses amazingly as well. gf3, bishop e4, fe4, and h3. And that's it. There's nothing I can do. I played rook d2 and resigned. Of course, he just pushes h2. So this position with queen c5 is just extraordinary. I mean, understanding just how powerful these two pawns in conjunction with the bishop are, at least for me, was very hard. And again, coming back to this position where I played e5, I have a strong center. I should be slightly worse. There's a knight coming to f4, but at least I can do something passive like this. It's not the end of the world. I can do this and maybe get away with it. There's still pressure on h4, maybe. Okay, it's still a playable position. Yeah, explaining e5 is hard. After the game, I sat in my room and I thought about e5, trying to reconstruct the thinking process. I just couldn't. If I saw someone play e5, I would just say that that's a blunder. Why do you play that? And then explaining to yourself why you would do that is, I don't know, it's impossible for me. Okay, so this was my round 2 game. Obviously, I wasn't happy. Congratulations to my opponent. This queen c5 idea is just great. And queen f6 also, preventing g4. So, coming back to the start of the game, when I had the opportunity to play g4, had I played it, it would have been a completely different game. Now, obviously, everything is blocked, and he has no play on the king's side. It would have been a different game. I regret not finding g4. I think this is my biggest mistake. Not understanding, not connecting this pin with his future play. Okay, thank you for watching. I hope you found the game instructive. I know I have, and I hope it helps. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.